Hello everybody and welcome to this week's UK virtual study tour, Marshall Monday. I have been branded again, look, t-shirts have arrived. I'm representing the University, the Durham University, so you can tell where we're going today. Very excited to welcome the representatives of Durham University, including one of our alumni, so that's very exciting, nice to see him too. And I'm sure that we will all learn a great deal from today. So Jessa, I'll hand over to you. Oh, by the way, we are recording, just to remind everybody that we are recording. Jessa.
Hi, thank you so much. So let me just share my screen first and foremost. So can you see the actual presentation? Or is it still like the, yep, okay, great. So I'm just going to give you a really brief overview of Durham University, so talk to you a little bit about what we have to offer as an institution, and then we're going to hear from one of our professors a little bit of an academic presentation, so highlighting one of our key areas of research, and then after that you're going to hear from some students, and then at the end you'll have the opportunity to ask some questions. But please feel free to send through those questions throughout the entire presentation, and we'll get to those at the end. So.
Jessa, I'm sorry to interrupt. We're seeing the embedded PowerPoint, so if you want to make the full screen, then we might be able to see it a little better.
Oh, okay. I thought it was already doing that. Let me just quickly check something. How's that?
Perfect.
Awesome. So what you're seeing now is a little bit of an aerial shot of Durham Cathedral. That's sort of the center point of Durham. So we are the third oldest institution in England. We're established in 1832. And what you're seeing here is part of UNESCO World Heritage Protected Site as well. So there's a lot of great rich history that you'll be seeing throughout Durham. The university population is just over 19,000 and about 30% of those students are international. And those students are coming from about 150 different countries, so it is a really diverse student community on campus at Durham. So where we're located, we're right up in the northeast. So the northeast, if you haven't already had the opportunity to come visit, is a really beautiful area of the UK. It is pretty temperate year round, so it never gets too cold, it never gets too hot, although some might say that it was a little bit too hot for comfort the last week or so. It's about 3 hours north of London by train and about an hour and a half south of Edinburgh by train. So it's really accessible and easy to get around. It's very safe. It's a very green area as well. I personally really enjoy hiking, and there are a huge number of hiking paths around where we live. And we're only about 25 minutes away from the beach as well. So if you're into that, that's definitely an opportunity for you. In terms of what we're good at, we're top 10 in the UK and top 100 in the world. So, you know, really good rankings. In terms of the specific subjects that we excel at, they tend to be things like geology, geography, anthropology and archaeology. We're number 1 in the UK for music. So there's a few key areas that we really excel at. And we have 19 subjects that are in the QS World Top 100 as well. A little bit about the experience that you'll get when you study with us at Durham. So we are a collegiate institution. So what that means is that every single student that comes to Durham is allocated to one of our 17 colleges. It's not like Oxford and Cambridge where you study in your college. In fact, it's the complete opposite. So each college makes sure that they have a really even spread of all academic disciplines represented. So it's your opportunity to meet people that might not be in your classroom necessarily. You have the opportunity to live in a college. If you would like to live in a college where it's only postgraduate students, that would be Eustonov. All others would be a mixture of postgraduate and undergraduate. And of course, there's plenty of opportunities for private accommodation throughout Durham City as well. These are all the different subject areas that we offer, and obviously there's quite a lot of interdisciplinary subjects within these, and we have about 150 different postgraduate taught programs. So there's a really wide spread of different opportunities for you to get involved in. And of course, being that we're in the UK, most of those master's programs will be 1 year in duration. And they're all split across into 4 different faculties. I just wanted to highlight some of our key research themes because I know that's what a fair few people in the audience will be interested in today. So these are the key areas that we really excel at, and the university does put quite a lot of resource into our research, and 98% of all of our research environments are either internationally excellent or world leading. So we really do take pride in that. And these are some of the research institutes that we have here at Durham. So there's quite an even spread of all different things, right? So, you know, there's physics, there's biosciences, there's energy, but then we go into the humanities and social sciences as well. Outside of studying, a big part of the Durham experience is sport. So we're #1 in the UK for team sport since 2013. And about 90% of our students are playing sport either, you know, at the top level for Team Durham or just socially as something extra to do. And we do have a postgraduate sports scholarship that tends to be quite popular for our US students. So we do have quite a lot of US students come over and play for Team Durham. So this, what you're seeing here is Maiden Castle, which is our sort of sports facilities. And I know it's probably looking very small compared to some of the US institutions that I'm sure you're used to, but we're very proud of it anyway. Outside of sport, theatre and music is huge for our students. So they really do tend to get quite engaged with this. So there's about 90 theatre productions a year that the students put on, and there's quite a lot of success in those productions as well, you know. So there's always students that are going up to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival and competing in the National Student Drama Festival. And like I've said before, we're #1 in the UK for music, and there's over 80 music societies, so all sorts of different ensembles, all different types of music variations that students can get involved in. And most of the colleges will have music practice rooms as well. So, you know, they'll have a piano, they'll have rooms where you can practice, and there is about 80 concerts a year. So basically, no matter what you're studying, when you come to Durham, there is never going to be a shortage of things for you to get involved in, even if you just want to go and, you know, watch. You don't necessarily have to play an instrument or anything like that. And these opportunities are open for beginners as well. So it's not just, you know, the professional musicians that are getting involved in that. And finally, this image that you're seeing here is the cathedral. So unfortunately, it won't be the case this year, but this is what it looks like for all of our students that are graduating. So every single one of our students does get the opportunity to graduate inside Durham Cathedral. And if you're not familiar with Durham Cathedral, you might have seen it in movies like Harry Potter, and I think it was in Avengers Endgame as well. So there's quite a lot of Hollywood connections on campus with us. And now I will pass over to Professor Gerard.
Hi, I hope I'm on screen. Was that right?
We can see you and not your slides quite yet if you're trying to share the screen. Oh, perfect.
How's that? Okay, can you hear me well?
Great.
Good. Okay, so I'm Chris Gerard. I'm a professor in the archaeology department, but actually I could as well be in the history department or a geography department, possibly even an earth sciences department as well. I'm one of those strange academics who crosses between lots of different disciplines. You now really reflects those varied interests, I suppose. This is the grave of a guy called John Burbin, which is in Massachusetts. And John, you can see, died in 1713. He was 86 when he died. So he spent most of his life living through the 1600s. And the interesting thing about John is that he was a Scot. He was born in Scotland and he died in Massachusetts. And in fact, he is one of a number of unwilling immigrants who ended up crossing the Atlantic in the middle of the 17th century. Now, trying to move the slide without any success at all. Let's try that. There we go. Okay, so we have plenty of information actually about John. We know the ship that he sailed on, and this document at the bottom, which comes from one of the National Archives in England, tells us that John, and I'm going to read it to you, that it says here that letters be written to Sir Arthur Hazelrig to deliver 150 sound Scottish prisoners to Augustine Walker, master of the ship Unity, to be transported to New England. And the date at the top is Monday, the 9th of November, 1650. And our friend John Burbin was among those 150 men. And his story is a very interesting one. He was taken prisoner at the Battle of Dunbar, and this is an engraving of that battle. Dunbar is just south of Edinburgh, about 100 miles north of Durham. He was taken prisoner on the 3rd of September 1650. He was one of about 30,000 troops who battled it out for several hours, and eventually he was taken prisoner by the English, and he was moved on a march together with about another 3,500 men southbound to the city of Durham. And this is the route that they took, which takes you from Dunbar there, just to the east of Edinburgh, down what is now the line of the road of the A1, through places like Alnwick, which is another Harry Potter destination, Morpeth, to Newcastle, to Durham. And this march was a difficult journey for those that undertook it. About 600 people died over this 100-mile walk or march. Most of them died of dysentery. They had been infected before the battle started in the early part of September. And they arrived eventually, having been given very little food, in Durham city. And they were locked up, John amongst them, in the cathedral, which we've just seen a good photograph of from the air. And this is another view taken towards the cathedral and Durham Castle in Durham along the river. So John would have arrived here on about the 11th of September 1650, together with about another 3,000 men. And he was incarcerated inside the cathedral, because the cathedral was a very large building. It wasn't really being used for anything at the time, because all services had been cancelled during the period of the Republic. We're at the period of what's called the Commonwealth in English history here. So there was no king on the throne. The king had lost his head at Whitehall the year before in 1649. So John was locked up inside the cathedral, and by looking at the archaeology inside the cathedral, we can say a little bit about what happened in there. In the late 1970s, a kind of oily film was found at the east end of the cathedral, in the area which is labelled choir here, which turned out to be magnesium nitrates. So this is urine. And at the west end of the nave there, you can see all these little labels, A's and B's, and they show us areas where there was burning up against the walls. And these are the areas probably, I think, where the men kept warm. So they lived at the west end, and they used the east end of the cathedral as their toilet. They continued to die at quite an alarming rate, and the people who found themselves to be sick were taken into the castle. And this is a document written in October 1650, which tells us part of that rather tragic story. And I'll read it for you. It says at the bottom in this original document, there are about 500 sick in the castle and about 600 yet in health in the cathedral, the most of which are in probability Highlanders, they being hardier than the rest. and about 1,600 are dead and buried. So John survived all of this, and in fact, as we know from the letter I showed you earlier on, he was sent across the Atlantic in the Unity about 9 days after this letter was written. Now, the reason that I became involved in this story as an archaeologist is because in 2013, they were digging some holes for a new cafe, and underneath this yellow line here where that dark earth is, they found this tan-coloured clay, and in the tan-coloured clay were lots of skeletons. And these are the remains of some of the men who died after that tragic march southbound at the end of 1650. And it was quite a process of excavation to retrieve 29 individuals here who were buried in 2 mass graves. This graphic shows for you some of the bodies, or a sketch of the bodies, the outline of the bodies as they were found. You can see they're all buried north-south. Most Christian burials are buried east-west, but at the time we had no idea what date they might be. In fact, when I first saw them, I thought they might be prehistoric because there were no artifacts with them at all. But of course, later research showed them to be dated to the middle of the 17th century. We took the skeletons back to the laboratory in the archaeology department, and Anwin, seen here, analysed the bones for us. She found that they were all males and that most of them were very young. They were aged between about 13 years old and 25 years old. Some of these were children really, child soldiers, and many of them are just young men. Some of the teeth were very interesting, some pretty disastrous dental health here, which if you need an encouragement to see your dentist in the near future, this surely is one slide that you don't want to show. But the really interesting thing amongst the mandibles and the teeth is in the bottom right here, where I'm showing you a picture head on of one of the crania. You can see this crescent-shaped gap between the teeth, which is characteristic of pipe smokers. So this guy smoked a clay pipe, which means there was tobacco around, and that in turn means that we must be dealing with a grave and a set of individuals who were buried sometime after about 1612, 1615, when tobacco smoking became popular in England. This is tobacco coming from the plantations in Virginia, of course. So we needed to get a date, and Andrew Millard here helped us to get a radiocarbon date, which placed the individuals at about 1650. We also did some DNA. We have some excellent DNA labs in the archaeology department, and that showed that some of the individuals were brothers. They were related to each other. They were kin. And we also did an analysis of their teeth, which was done by colleagues of ours. And they found that in the plaque, in the debris, the dental calculus between the teeth, there was evidence of oats, which you see bottom left here, evidence of brassicas, possibly kale or cabbage, something like that in the top right, middle right, and in the bottom right, evidence of sooting and charcoal, which is probably breathing in fumes from fires. We were able to do a reconstruction of one of the crania. This was done again by colleagues, this case at Liverpool John Moores. You can see that we collaborate in this project with a lot of different universities, and that's very much the name of the game in the kind of research that I do. And this gave us a face really for the project, which you see in its completed form in the bottom right-hand corner. Some people say he looks like a bit like the guy out of Outlander. Okay, so not everybody ended up in those mass graves and grave pits. Some people got out alive, like our friend John. Some of them went down coal mines. Some of them went to work in salt in nearby Newcastle. Others of them went off to East Anglia to go and help with drainage projects. We know that it's possible some of them went to fight in Ireland Some of them went to fight in France. About 500 of them went there. Some may have gone to Barbados. It's possible that others went to Virginia, perhaps in small numbers. But the ones that we know most about went to New England. And they ended up being apprenticed as indentured servants in this part of the world, in and around Boston, in the period between 1650 and 1657. Afterwards, they were released and they ended up getting married and having children and leading lives there on the frontier, usually, of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. And that's where John comes into the story. Now, the reason that I titled this talk Public Education is that this project attracted a huge amount of media interest from newspapers, as you might expect, but also, and perhaps Megan's going to say something about this a bit later, through the US program, Who Do You Think You Are?, where we trace the roots of the actor John Cryer. And John is related. He's the ninth time grandson of one of the descendants of the Battle of Dunbar. There were also plays which were scripted and written, and also there have been a number of songs written about the project and some of the individuals and their stories. So, this is, if you like, a kind of detective story. It's a sort of whodunit. It's a cold case, if you like, in an iconic location. And although these people can't speak for themselves, what we wanted to do was to deepen the public's education and engagement with this subject and take them through the project. And many Dunbar descendants, like John, have powerful and emotive links to this story. And in the US, this is very much part of their national story, and it's important for their identity today. So as we very quickly found out, and Megan may say something more about this, we were walking the line here between past and present lives. And we put together an online course, which is running at the moment, actually. You can still join in if you want to, which has attracted about over 4,000 people from 109 different countries, many of them in the US. Now, not surprisingly, these learners ask a lot of questions, and they reflect on some of the issues that I've raised for you here, like slavery and immigration, the nature of starting over, beginning a new life, about forming new communities, about lives that they left behind in Scotland. And most of all, they write to me and wonder about what would have happened if their lives had been lived again with different, perhaps happier, perhaps less happier endings. How different would the lives of those descendants be today? So the way I would conclude this is by saying this, that Dunbar, the Battle of Dunbar in 1650, was 1 hour of battle, but it had an impact which has endured through 9 generations, and it still endures today. So I'm going to end now with a message from the research team for you. Okay, so if you'd like to find out more about the project, then there's lots of information here which you can hear about. There is more videos, there's podcast, and there's a free MOOC, as I said, that you can sign up to, and you'd be very welcome to join us and get a flavour of Durham archaeology on that course. Okay, so that's me. I'm going to stop sharing at this point.
So Megan, we'll pass it over to you now if you want to share your experience.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me now and everything? Is it all working? Wonderful. All right, well, I do not have a fancy slideshow like Professor Gerard does. I've been asked to give a bit of informal insights on my experience thus far and what I'm planning to do as I begin my studies at Durham this fall, actually. I'm preparing to move to England in a few weeks, so it's been rather busy amongst the pandemic in collecting my visa and all the necessary paperwork. But first off, I'd like to thank everyone for attending and spending your morning or whatever time of day it is for you with all of us here. So my name is Megan Olszewski, and I will be working on a PhD in archaeology under Professor Gerard as a Fulbright scholar at Durham University. And how I met Professor Gerard was really just kind of a turn of fate, I guess, if you will. I was, a bit of background on myself, I studied at UCLA for my undergraduate degree and studied history. And I always wanted to go on for graduate studies at a higher level. But after graduation, I ended up happening into the world of television down in Los Angeles. I began working with television as a researcher and producer. And so after that, little stint in television, I was working on one show called Who Do You Think You Are, which Professor Gerard mentioned. And I was researching the story for John Cryer's story. And we came across an ancestor who was involved at the Battle of Dunbar. And we knew we had a story at that point and we had to chase it. So back in 2017, 3 years ago, I reached out to Durham University and began researching this ancestor story and talking with Professor Gerard about the experience of the Scotsmen and their indentured servitude in New England. So after a few months of research, we arranged filming. We showed up in Durham and placed Chris on camera with John Cryer, and then we aired the episode that spring of 2018. And so afterwards, very kindly, Chris invited me out to Durham to meet on and attended the opening of an exhibition they had on the Scottish soldiers. And so at that moment, I knew that I had to return to academia. I missed it too much, and I was just my calling. And so I talked to Chris about starting research under him, and then I began looking into applying to Durham and applying to sources of funding. And so I ended up reaching out to my undergraduate university and the graduate scholarship advisors there who were beyond helpful and aided me in crafting an application for Fulbright and Marshall Scholarship, and even conducted practice interviews with me. And so it was immensely helpful. And so if you're able to contact your graduate advisors, I highly recommend that. So from there, began the application for the scholarships, and luckily was able to obtain an interview with both of them and was chosen as a Fulbright finalist for this year, which I'm incredibly grateful for. And so I would say, I'm very much looking forward to my time at Durham and excited for all the resources that are available at the university and within the archaeology department. And I'm very much so excited to continue research on these Scottish soldiers. Particularly, I'll be focusing in on what happened to their time in Durham Cathedral. And so what happened to those who went to New England, what happened to those who ended up in Barbados or France, and how they established a memory or a heritage of sorts for their descendants. I'm very curious as to how someone who's in a situation where they're forced from their homeland without any choice, what is it that they carry with them, or what is it that they take with them in their memory of home and pass on to their family? And so if time permits, I'd also like to conduct some cross research with other groups of individuals forced from their homes in the 17th century, including individuals from Spain, and also any Irish folk who ended up in Barbados as well. As Chris mentioned, the story has a lot of public engagement, and so I would love to tap into that because I am also very much so passionate about the sharing of history and archaeology for the general public and engaging the public with our past. And so utilizing my background in film and television, I'm starting to lay the groundwork for a potential documentary that we can film while I'm at Durham. And so pending the pandemic, perhaps we'll start filming this summer or spring, we'll see, fingers crossed. And so, yeah, so hopefully maybe in a few years, you all will be able to see a documentary on the research that we have conducted. And so like Chris mentioned, you know, Dunbar was only 1 hour battle back in 1650, but it's amazing to see how it has connected so many people to this day and has played a significant role in all of our lives who are associated with this story. And so it'll be interesting to see where the research leads us. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Megan. We'll pass it over to Dan now to share his experience.
All right, thank you. Let me get my presentation up here. Also not a fancy one like Professor Gerard's, but there we go. All right, is that showing up clearly? Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you clearly and it's showing up, but if you could make it the full screen, then that'll be even better.
Yeah.
Great, thanks, Dan. All
right, yeah, sure thing. All right, so hi everyone. My name is Dan. And I was a Marshall Scholar at Durham for the 2017-2018 academic year. So I did my undergrad at Northwestern University near Chicago and did physics and math there, and then went to Durham to study for a master's in mathematical sciences. And even though I studied at Durham on the Marshall, I actually found Durham via Fulbright. And that's a story that I can go into some other time, I guess. But similar to Megan, I guess, was kind of following these two paths, and one ended up not panning out and the other one did. So in any case, Durham was my first time living outside the US, one of the few times I'd been outside the US in my life. And it was honestly like a perfect place to go for my first time living abroad. Durham is, as you've seen from the earlier presentations, it has such a rich history to it, and so much natural beauty, so much architectural beauty. And what I really loved about it is that it felt very easy to quickly find my way around and develop a sense of familiarity with it. And a big part of that whole experience was the college system. As Jessa mentioned in her presentation, Durham is a collegiate university. My college was Gray College. It's one of the more modern colleges up on the hill. And as she mentioned, it's kind of a built-in immediate community when you arrive. So rather than arriving, especially from abroad, and not knowing anyone and trying to find a group of friends, there's already this community in place. So for me, it was the postgraduate community within Gray that became my main group of friends in Durham, and what ended up being one of the closest group of friends that I've had, even though I was only there for 1 year. So a large part of that was the various events that college put on throughout the year. And so this is not unique to Gray. This is, every college will do things a little differently. Major holidays, so things like Christmas or Halloween are also big in the UK, but even something like Thanksgiving, that's an American holiday, we still were able to do a big dinner with all the postgrads in Gray, as well as like little events for things like Pi Day and the like. And lots of opportunities to get involved in organizing these events, as well as a budget that comes along for coming up with new events. So I was one of the social secretaries for Gray College in my year, and got to play a part in putting a lot of these things on and building this community, which was a really cool opportunity. There are also some bigger events put on by college as a whole. So at the very end of year, and I guess I should caveat by saying I don't know what any of this will look like with the pandemic and all, but hopefully sooner rather than later, these sorts of events will be safe to be back up and running. But there's the end of the year Phoenix Ball, which is a big all-night event where you start off with a fancy dinner off-site, and then there's all these carnival rides and then a silent disco until sunrise, basically. In addition to all the fancy events, there's also rowdier events like Gray Day, which is an all-day music event that happens on the college lawn. And one thing to point out is that because the drinking age in the UK is 18, college can actually provide things like wine at dinners, or there's an event called Bar Fest where they have different types of beers from local and distant breweries. But yeah, so lots of different events to attend, including formal dinners, which are one of the mainstays of the college social calendar. So each college will have formal dinners within itself for its own community every month, every couple weeks, depending on the college, as well as a few of these special formal dinners where you can go and visit another college. So get kind of a change of scenery, interact with people from another college that you might not meet otherwise. And a lot of them have these fun themes. Like this is a formal that I went to at Hatfield College, where it was a masquerade themed. This was a formal that I went to at St. Mary's College, which is Harry Potter themed. And as you might imagine, lots of the students at Durham are huge Harry Potter fans, myself included. So being able to get sorted into Hogwarts house and pet an actual owl was something I'd never thought I would have the chance to do. And I got to do it as a student at Durham. So yeah, an amazing opportunity there. As well as the aforementioned just magnificent Durham Cathedral, where in normal circumstances, we both matriculate, which is a ceremony at the beginning of the year, and graduate. And part of these sorts of formal events is, at least in a lot of the colleges, you have an actual gown. So it's another fun Harry Potter connection there, is that you do legitimately dress up in a suit, tie, or a dress and gown to attend these sorts of events. And it's just such a, I mean, I loved my US graduation as well, but this is just so different and so amazing in its own right that, yeah, it was also just a, and yeah, here's a view of the cloisters from the different Harry Potter scenes that Durham Cathedral has been involved with. So the especially keen among you might recognize those. And finally, these are a couple of seemingly unrelated photos, but these are both related to the different society that I had the opportunity to be involved with at Durham. So the left one is from a different masquerade event, or the Durham Union Society, which brings in speakers from around the world to give talks to the union members, as well as is the host of the Debate Society. So I got to try debate for the first time as an incoming novice when I started Durham, and then by the end of the year, got to actually go and compete at the Manchester InterVarsity. And then on the right, as we saw in the earlier presentation, Durham sends a lot of student creative productions up to the Edinburgh Fringe. And so as part of my year at Durham, I was heavily involved in the Improv Society at Durham, Shell Shock. And so we took a show up to the Edinburgh Fringe, and I got to have that whole experience as well of not just performing in a show, but of getting to attend all the shows at the Fringe, well, not all the shows obviously, but getting to get caught up in that environment of the Fringe and see other shows as well. So also an incredible opportunity, especially given the proximity to Durham, even if you're just going to watch things. And I also did a math degree. If anyone has any questions about that, I'm happy to talk about that, but I figured I'd go for the more general stuff. And if there are any math people who want to talk to me, yeah, that's all I got.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dan, and thank you, Megan and Chris, as well, for taking the time out to share your experiences and your research. It's really interesting. I personally had no idea about the Who Do You Think You Are involvement, so that's super exciting for me, and something that I will be talking about every opportunity that I get. I don't see any questions as of yet in the chat box, so if anybody has any questions at all, please feel free to chuck them in, and we'll do our best to answer them as they come through. I'm actually, Dan, pretty interested to know, just quickly, my own question. When you went up to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, like, what's it like? So do you sort of have to, like, do your performance and then just go, or do you get to really fully experience it? Because I know a lot of our students do that. A lot of the students, especially, obviously, involved in drama and theatre and stuff like that. What was that like?
Yeah, so it's definitely intense. So we were doing a show every day. So one week was evening performances, one week was afternoon performances. But sometime around that, each member of the casting crew would spend 2 to 3 hours on the Royal Mile flyering people. So advertising our show, dressed up in costumes, trying to get people interested in buying tickets. And then sometimes whoever was in the cast for that particular night would also do a practice run at some point in that day. And so that would usually take up, I guess, 4 to 5 hours of each day. And then besides that, then yeah, the day was kind of our own, but yeah, it's just such a like chaotic but fun energy up at the Fringe. So it's draining, but it's very much in a good way.
Very cool. All right, so we've had a few questions come in, so I'll answer 2 of them, and then there's one for you, Dan, coming up. So the first question that we have is, do most postgrad students live in colleges? So no, most of them don't. So quite a few of them do. I would say the percentage would probably be around 30%, if that, and then a lot of the students will live either just in shared housing accommodation or private accommodation throughout Durham. So there's a lot of, you know, sort of like typical halls of residence student accommodation in Durham. And then pretty much the entirety of Durham City is just shared housing for students. So a lot of students take that opportunity and go into shared housing. The cost of living in the Northeast is fairly cheap, especially when you compare it to bigger cities in the South. So it's a pretty good deal either way. And even if you're not living in a college, you can still get the full college experience. So you can still attend all of the events and stuff like that. And another question was, what's it like for transport within the city and to the university? So Durham is incredibly walkable. You would definitely not need a car. In fact, I would recommend against it because the roads are tiny. and it is very scary to drive through. Speaking for myself, driving into Durham every day. There's buses throughout Durham, so no matter where you go, you can catch a bus anywhere. There's also a train line that runs right through Durham. So, you know, if you want to go up to Newcastle, which is the next biggest city of about 250,000, it's 10 minutes on the train, or 12 to be exact. And the buses, I think you can get a deal where it's about £1 a day as a student, and it's very, you know, there's access to all areas within Durham, but also outside as well. So, you know, you can get a bus out to the beach, you can get a bus out to all the different cities as well. And Emma's just posted a link in the chat, but one of the colleges is postgraduate only. So it is definitely more popular for our postgraduate students that want to maybe have a little bit more of a relaxed environment compared to a college that's mixed with undergraduate students as well. That's an option for students. So Dan, the question for you is if you could just talk about the transition between studying in the US to studying in the UK, and potentially highlight some unique challenges or opportunities that came with adapting to the different education system.
Yeah, definitely. So the biggest challenge I would say for me is the difference in receiving grades for work. So in the US, I was very much accustomed to every piece of work that I do has a grade assigned to it, and that to some extent factors into my overall grade in the course, right? So maybe homework is only 10% of my grade and exams are like 40, 50%. And then there's some other assessments, projects or whatever thrown in there. But at least for my course at Durham, there are 6 exams at the end of the academic year. And each one of those is 100% of your grade for that course. So it took some getting used to, and I think but what I ended up liking about it is that it meant that my motivation for doing, because it wasn't just like there's nothing to do for the rest of the year, right? So they do give out homeworks and formative assignments to actually aid in your learning process. So you're not just completely on your own there, and they'll give feedback, and the amount of feedback, I guess, varies depending on course and professor. But it meant that I had to be intrinsically motivated to be doing the work, as opposed to having this external pressure of, oh, I need to make this grade. It was this internal push of, oh, I am here because I want to understand this. And so that was more where it was coming from than rather this, this grade pressure. So the first few months, it did feel like, oh, wow, nothing counts, nothing, I can just do whatever. But then realized that, oh, right, homework gets assigned for a reason, and yeah, found my way back. And thankfully, a big part of this was that at Durham, in contrast to some of the Southern universities, you really do get integrated with the British students, and it's not just like, oh, I'm surrounded by Americans all the time, as is sometimes the case at other places. So having British friends who have been living in this system for years and years and know how to operate well within it, I think was a game changer for me, just in terms of how you even study for an exam that is 100% of your grade. And the answer is just one day at a time for that last little period that you don't have classes before exams. So yeah, that was my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not 100% sure if it's exactly unique to Durham. I don't know if anybody's noticed my accent yet, but I'm actually from Australia. I studied in Australia. But it is very much the case at Durham that a large percentage of your grade, if not 100% of that, will be sat in a final exam. There are formative and sometimes summative works that you submit to sort of help keep you on track and guide you down the right path. And all students also have access to an academic tutor throughout their studies. So with each of your classes, there will be somebody that you can go to in the department to get help, or if you just want somebody to talk through any of the works that you're doing, there are people there available to support you throughout the process. As is common with most UK institutions, there are also clubs and societies for pretty much every academic discipline. So, you know, if for some reason you don't want to talk to your academic tutor or the professor, you can go to that club or society, and there's usually somebody that, you know, if they haven't already taken that class, they know somebody who has, and they can point you in the right direction of getting help with that. And was there any other questions that people had while we're still on? We still have about 5 or so minutes, so plenty of time for asking more questions. I know actually before we started it was mentioned that there might be some people curious about what Durham offers in terms of support for disability services as well. So I'll just take a minute to sort of go through that, and I think Emma might put a link in the chat box as well. Basically, as a part of your application, you just tick a box that says you're interested in receiving some kind of support, whatever that might be, and say, basically what happens from there is somebody from the Disability Support Services will reach out to you directly and begin that discussion. So you'll have a one-to-one call with somebody in the office who you can talk to you about the sort of support services that you might like, and then they'll talk to you about what's on offer, and you work together to develop a plan throughout your entire academic studies with us. So you'll get help with exams for any type of sort of impairment or disability that you might have. They will help you throughout the course of your studies, so in all of your classes, whether they be lectures, tutorials, seminars, labs, what have you. The support is available throughout your entire time at Durham, and they do really take everybody as a case-by-case basis. So nobody is just sort of handed like, you know, here's a package for this, make it work. Everybody, like, they take a lot of effort into sitting down with each individual student and making sure that you have everything available for you to succeed in the course. And yeah, not seeing any more questions. So if anybody has any fun trivia that they'd like to share with the group. Otherwise, I just want to personally thank you all so much for attending the session today. I really do hope that you've found it informative or interesting.
Yes, I think you've got another quick question. Sorry, just popped
Yep.
up.
Perfect. So is the campus and city widely accessible? I would say of UK cities, to be completely honest with you, not 100%. There's a lot more that we could do, but with the limits of a tiny little UK city, it's hard. It's not all bad, like mostly, you know, there aren't that many cobblestone streets and stuff like that, but it is very hilly. So it's very hilly to get around, but most of the colleges are accessible. And if you are a student that requires some sort of accessibility features, you can identify that on your application, and then you'll be allocated to a college that is suitable for you for that as well. Oh, and Emma's just put through a link that outlines the accessibility of Durham as a university and as a city as well.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jessa and Dan and everybody who spoke, Chris and Megan. And it's really been wonderful to have you today and to learn so much more about Durham. Of course, Harry Potter always gets mentioned a great deal whenever we talk about Durham. And I know that I've been to the Castle College several times and actually explored many of the departments at the university, including Chris's own department. I think we met up last year or the year before, I forget which. It's all blurring into one now, but it is really wonderful to hear about the university. Thank you everybody for coming. Next week is our last session of these for the time being. I'm not going to volunteer Luann and Sarah yet, but I am thinking about trying to extend this program and do more universities over the rest of the year. Clearly missing September because you and I are very busy during September for some reason around scholarships or something, deadlines, all that stuff. But if you would be interested in us extending this program, do let us know. Anyway, so next week is the University of Kent. And we're looking forward to visiting them. I won't have a t-shirt, I only have Durham and Manchester, so there you go, just another plug. Anyway, so thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, everybody who spoke this evening. We look forward to hopefully visiting you in person sometime again soon. And please, everybody, see you next week. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.